takes 21 steps.
Part of
From the beginning
learning
to
the
the
sequence of walking on the
Relatively easy. Just being able to count to 21 and you knew that.
The hardest part was about everything. I was very young, only 19 years old, and very, very clumsy.
Take this group back 50 years, and it wasn't as regulated to the 21 steps until you hit the mat.
How many steps does a tomb guard take when they cross the mat?
The tomb guard takes 21 steps from the beginning to the end, start to finish, and they pause for 21 seconds. It's the highest honors that we can give our nation's unknown, and it emulates the 21 gun salute.
So my follow-up question then would be to Joe, and I'm going to just kind of go down the list there. Joe, the follow-up question to that is, what was the hardest part of learning the sequence of walking on the mat?
I think the hardest part of learning the sequence of walking on the mat was, although we take 21 steps, there are certain portions coming onto the actual plaza that isn't 21 steps. So learning where you got to stop, what blocks to stop in, how to rotate. But once you're on the actual plaza itself and the relief commander starts calling commands, everything's 21 steps from there. So that, I would say the hardest part was just making sure you knew what block to stop in, where to step to, and staying in sync.
I've got to take this group back 50 years, and it wasn't as regulated to the 21 steps until you hit the mat. And what I mean by that is everything today seems to be regulated from the time the oncoming Sentinel comes out for the guard change and the number of steps by the relief commander and so forth. Back in the Coons age, we did everything by the steps of once we left the inspection area was 21 steps. So once you had that 21 down, it was no science to it.
I think it was easy, relatively easy. Just being able to count to 21 and knew that I stopped on my left foot. Only times I think it was more difficult is when right after Memorial Day, when you got a brand new mat out there, you didn't have the wearing spots to go and see them and knew that's where you were targeting. But for the most part, the 21 is just like any other drill and ceremony. Start off with the left foot and finish with the left foot and stop there. So it became a routine. I would say during my era, 83 to 85, we were very rigid about training. So you might have some of your day off for the first day off. We would do 1 on, 2 days off. But the second day you were working on things and we stayed in the catacombs. So we did what we needed to do to practice and make it as flawless and seamless as it could be. So that be practice.
Now, I'm going to follow up with you on this one because you were there during the internment of the Vietnam unknown soldier. So not only did you have to learn your normal 21 set sequence and the flow of a guard change or a re-ceremony on the plaza, but halfway through your tour, you had to modify this and learn a brand new sequence. What was that like?
Prayerfully, I had been there about a year then. So it was different, definitely different going around the front where we got peace, victory, and valor, working around that side and making sure we still did everything the same way. Once you got to the mat, everything was still the same. Essentially, we understand that, nothing changed in that regard, but it was something different. Being that close, it's on your left shoulder. I mean, you're closer to the front of it. So it was much different than what it is in a normal position. So it was just something you had to get used to.
How long of training did it take for you guys to get it dialed in?
At that time, we had a core. We only had like 3 people walking in. So we did most of it because it didn't take long. It was just understanding how were we going to go ahead and then come up with a way to actually do everything for the persons down the steps where they can actually see. That became a little bit difficult in the beginning, coming up with something that made sense. and the continuity between the reliefs that was still augmented in a manner in which everyone did the same thing. But it was different. You're standing right there at the steps versus being on the other side of the crypts. But it was interesting. And it wasn't no more than, I think, probably 3 weeks. About 3 weeks, I think it's up.
Wow, that's interesting, because I know that for when we did the disinterment in 1998, it wasn't 3 weeks. Probably about a week in, they started the process of sealing off the area, and then we started learning the lower landing changing. So we were going all the way down, not to the bottom of the steps, to that very first landing where the benches are. And as a trainee, that was my task. First Relief just happened to fall into doing all of the daytime shifts. And so I was at RC in training at the time. I hadn't earned my badge. I'd get it the next week after the disinterment. But we didn't spend 3 weeks doing it. We had to learn it quickly and then just execute it for about 3 days. So what was the hardest part of learning your sequence as the commander of the guard?
The most difficult parts of my main ceremonial mission was the full honors wreath ceremony. And we are the three people, the bugler, the drummer, and the wreath bearer, who do not go to the position of ceremonial at ease or parade rest. There's no exercising the troops for the wreath party. So I remember that was definitely one of the toughest things for me, especially during COVID. The sequence changed. Chelsea was pretty instrumental in creating those changes to help make sure we were complying with COVID guidance and being safe on the plaza, especially with visiting dignitaries. And a lot of times, especially if high-ranking individual was present or part of the ceremony, it was not synchronized very well. The troops were on the marks very early, and the stand for the bugler, the drummer, and the wreath bearer could be anywhere from 30, 40, 50 minutes at the position of attention. And we had done our stand in rope or in sword and saber, with the battalion and the regiment up at Summerall. But as we all know, posture is different at the tomb. This is not just a stand test, for CCG or for, someone in 4th Battalion. This is tomb posture, because as we all know, you command the presence and the attention and that atmosphere of silence and respect of everyone in attendance when you're standing at the end of that mat, when you're bearing that wreath. And I remember that was something that Chelsea, who was, one of my primary trainers, really imparted on me, was your posture when you're at attention. And the sequence was one thing, but it was really, that was what I thought about the most, was having that commanding presence and ensuring with my posture, I'd done everything I could up until that point with my uniform, in rehearsals, in the actual wreath laying portion of the ceremony. But that stand was really where we felt we made the greatest contribution to a full honors wreath ceremony. So I would go out there at night and I would stand there, and I would have whoever was out there, whether I was posted, I would have them zoom a camera in on me and watch and see if they could see, jitters or sways or, leaning forward, skiing, anything like that. But a lot of times I would just, go out there on someone else's shift and just have them kind of keep tabs on me and see if it looked good, see if it looked sturdy and, looked representative of the platoon, because that's what I wanted to do. I didn't get a lot of opportunities to go out onto the plaza, like the tomb guards that I served with. And that was an opportunity for me to represent the platoon. And I felt that stand was the biggest part of it. So
the myth that is floating around out there in one of these emails that we see all the time is that tomb guards dress in front of a full-length mirror. Who wants to tackle that one? And then we'll go into some stories with my follow-up question.
I can go first, since I'm the most recent newbie OBH, I guess you can say. That is false. We do have big mirrors in the quarters, but they are not for dressing. They are not for checking any sort of uniform anything unless it's the 10-minute 2 mark, because everything's driven by a time mark down there. But no, everyone gets dressed in a locker room, and you may or may not have a small mirror inside your locker room, but you don't get dressed in front of a full-length mirror. You get checked off and verified by 3 or 4 individuals at the 10-minute mark in front of a full mirror.
Excellent. Thank you for dispelling that. I know that when we were down there, our quarters were different. Matt's talking about 3 renovations during his time frame. We didn't have renovations that I can remember, but we had a ton of mirrors, and we never got dressed in front of those mirrors. Joe, what do you think?
Well, I was going to say that's probably how the myth came up, because, there's mirrors. When I was down there, those mirrors were out front when people would come in for tours, and they would see us practicing, doing mirror time, practicing our weapons manual. So I could see how the myth started, but no, there were no mirrors in the new guy room that I ever recall. And I don't think I ever had time within that 3 minutes to look in a mirror, get dressed, and sprint back, regardless of what uniform I was getting into. So,
right. Can you, to caveat on to that myth, can you, Joe, tell me what is mirror time? And what does it consist of?
So mirror time is for a Sentinel. And I guess for the guard that's changing, it's working on angles, make sure your weapon's in the proper position, make sure you're standing right and correct at the position of attention, making sure everything's flowing smooth, but mostly it's angles. I can't stress angles enough, because and it helps if you're able to train with, your whoever else you're walking with in front of mirrors, and you don't have somebody there to critique it, so you can see each other's angles to make sure that everything's lining up. So that's what we refer to as mirror time.
And Craig, during your time frame, did they have mirror time?
Boy, a lot of this discussions take me down memory lane. Our tomb guard quarters were in a completely different area than what they are today. I don't recall much mirror time as quote unquote until we were ready to blouse. And once we were ready to blouse, then we stood in front of the mirror. So it'd be easier for the Sentinel going on to see any unacceptable pleats or whatever. But if we were practicing, the catacombs had a full-size mat and everything. It wasn't that far back from tomb guard quarters. So we would go back in pairs before a guard change and work on making sure everything was the same. But we had one mirror, and I only recall doing blouses in front of that mirror.
Carnell, same question to you. What did, for your time frame in the 80s, what did mirror time consist of?
If I could go back to the first part, for badge holders at that time, we had the old wooden lockers. Then we had like off to the back wall where the new men would have wall lockers, and that way they would get dressed at. I still remember whether I was changing or walking. Yeah, I would be getting dressed in the badge room, because that's just where everything was. At that time, Sergeant Thomas, he was still E5. We both were E5s at the same time. So one of us just would decide who would bring what blouse. One would bring a walk-in blouse, one would bring with chevrons. And I remember everything being right there. So yeah, it was all the guys at that time. It was all men. So we did get dressed there. We did use the mirrors for practicing. And it's the greatest tool, because it was mentioned earlier, I think it was Joe. Even if I'm changing, I want to make sure the weapon is straight up and down. So I would sit there and look at that thing. I want to make sure all my angles, as was mentioned, am I getting the wrong cant while I'm sitting here and going right shoulder, left shoulder? How close am I coming to the bill of my hat when I'm crossing over? These things you can't just pick up and learn on the mat, dressed up, ready to go. You need to be practicing and seeing exactly. And then can you go get your buddy who you normally want to change with can you put them on the other side of a wall and you still get the commands? And are you hearing the weapon hit in one sound? These are things that gets us to go ahead and have that synchronization that makes us better than most, because these are things that we spend that time doing. And give me the part B of your question there again.
I was just talking about your mirror time and what did it consist of?
Yeah, and that was it. And that mirror was great. The Newman, you had no reason not to be in, because you weren't the guy past me to get outside. Because if you didn't have enough initiative to work on it, or and come say, hey, I'm doing this, what do you think? And ask for help. You weren't going to get outside, because that means you were going out and embarrass the unknowns and us as a relief. So those were the opportunities to practice your craft. Is my hand down too low? Is it too high? I mean, it's so many different things. And this is back 30 years ago. I still remember this. You had to do it. It's no way around it. You shouldn't be getting all the corrections that some of the people need on the mat with somebody down on one end of it, you other, and they telling you can't in, can't out. You should already know what you're going to do it. Okay. And get yourself in endurance. How long does it take for you, if it's in the wintertime, how long is it going to take for you to start getting away from what you should be doing? And so maybe you need to work on your endurance and actually practice doing a whole hour of actually manual and actual walking. The catacombs was there. Opportunity was there. On the plazas, and that way you learn how to be a great sentinel.
Chelsea and I already having to learn how to do the guard change, not learn how to walk and all those kinds of things. I know that mirrors were incredibly important for my training process. I had 2 assistant relief commanders when I was the first RC, and they really pushed to make sure that my angles were correct. And they would harass me continually about that. And the only way that I could get any better at any of that was to stand in front of the mirrors all the time and just work. And in my time, when you walked into the tomb guard quarters, you had the mirrors, as Joe was talking about, right up there. So you could see, the different angles standing in one spot. And I'm sure that they've since fixed it, but being first relief, practicing the guard change, you tend to stab the ceiling a lot, going through the sequence process of learning that. But the mirrors were not only super beneficial learning the craft of being a tomb guard and being a relief commander, but they were also the one thing I hated to clean the most out of the tomb guard quarters. When you had to do changeover, those mirrors had to be spot free. And of course, it's like everything that we do. When you look at it from one angle, it looks good, but you turn just a second or you step up closer and look at it from an oblique angle, man, is that a messy mirror. And it would take hours cleaning those stupid things before the next relief could assume the duties and come on in. So while they were very beneficial, I distinctly hate cleaning mirrors to this day because of my experience down in the quarters.
You brought up an interesting point about stabbing the ceiling. We actually, to do practice inspection and full guard changes, we'd have to go outside behind the mobile unit, because even when we took bayonets off the weapons, we couldn't go to full shoulder arms without hitting the top of the mobile home. Matter of fact, we took as many ceiling tiles out of that mobile home that we could before we were told by the people we were renting it from that we'd have to pay reimbursement for tearing the mobile home apart. But those brought on, to hear Matt talk about the differences there. Cornell, you talk about going back 30 years, go back 50 years, my friend. As you talk, a lot of these things come into play.
I want to ask Chelsea, since you had to do a lot of mirror time as well, and you're the newest old guy of our group. Tell us about mirror time, what it was like as a sergeant of the guard.
So my mirror time experience is the same. It was just spread out over a 24-hour period. So instead of coming in and learning or spending division of minutes throughout the day, I would spend either 4 to 5 in the morning on the mirror, or 5 to 6 in the mirror, 4 to 5 on the plaza, 6 to 7 on the plaza. However that worked, wherever I was weakest at the time. If I was getting really good on my angles and understanding the weight mechanics of distribution of the wood. And that's when I knew, when I got really good at weight distribution of metal and wood, that some of those relief rifles needed to be replaced. So like, this one's off by at least half an ounce, and that one's not sanded down the right way, fix it. But then after work, I would have to divide that also in the afternoon or the evening, if I stay doing night hours, or just taking the first 4 or 5 hours so I could do my plaza time, or my mirror time. And I had a very specific time outside on the plaza. I would do at every stopping point or every significant turn in our sequence, I would do a weapons inspection. So I did do mirror time. I just did it before people started working and after people went home.
Okay. No, that's good. I think Carnell brought it up, is that you do not learn your trade as a tomb guard and guarding the unknown soldiers in this active military post by being on the mat. You learn it prior to walking out. And I know as a trainee, my 2 E5s were very harsh on me about, why are you standing around? Why are you not practicing? Why are you not doing mirror time? Why are you not studying or not? And so it's a constant training process. And that's where I don't ever remember sleeping in the quarters, because you were always training as a new man. And even when you've earned your badge and you're a badge holder, you still would get in front of the mirror, because again, it's like you were talking about, Chelsea, where you could pick up a different release weapon system and understand, it's just a touch different. The public's not going to see that touch different, but you will feel it. I know that when I'm doing things with my Oregon State Police Honor Guard, when I used to do that, they didn't have bayonets on their M14. And they'd always ask, can you do a weapons inspection? And I'd try and do a weapons inspection, and it was wrong. It just didn't feel right, because the weight of the bayonet was missing. And so I'd have to figure out how to move my hand. And then I knew, thankfully no other tomb guards ever saw this, but I knew that my angles were just horrible because I didn't have the right weapon system to use.
Right. Or the balance of shading. I knew when someone was getting focused in another direction when they were shaving down their weapon stocks. And I was like, this one's just 3, like, I feel like it's like half a centimeter, a little too round on this spot. You just need to take some more down on this spot. It helped me out a lot, but it was nice. It was nice going through. I just felt bad, because I'm in training, but I'm also having to provide top cover for the platoon. So no matter who was training me, I told the platoon at the time, I'm like, you make me the way I'm supposed to be. So that means if I'm training at 4, guess what? Someone else is going to be here at 4 also. And you guys can rock, paper, scissors all you want to, but someone's going to be here out here.
There's times when we would go and disappear into the catacombs. And during your time, did you ever go down as the commander of the guard and use the catacombs for a training advantage?
Absolutely. Definitely use the catacombs. We always had the extra black mat from the previous 6 months in there. And I remember it was Sergeant Tyler McKee. He was the 3rd Relief Commander when I took over. He took me in there and he handed me 2 kettlebells, and he taught me how to walk like a tomb guard, because I was struggling. And that was definitely an opportunity, especially during the day, because that's primarily when I was in, was, primarily during hours of cemetery operations. That was an opportunity for me to get that dialed in, because that was the first thing that people look at when that wreath starts coming out. So definitely spend some time in the catacombs.
Tell me about the kettlebells. That's I learned how to walk on a street curb. That, because I thought I could march well, and they brought me down there and said, no, here, Doug Baroga, actually in front of Honor Guard Company, took me out to the curb and had me walk up and down the curb for hours learning how to walk appropriately as a tomb guard. So what did they use what was the kettlebells for?
The main purpose of the kettlebells was to reduce the bounce in the step. So I definitely had some bounce. I was able to figure out initially the heel strike and I was able to roll my heels a little bit, but I remember having a good bit of bounce, and you could tell with my C-cap, it was going up and down, and the kettlebells kept me grounded essentially. One, kept my arms pinned, so I knew never to, I kind of had more awareness of my arms when, I went into pin, and then reducing that bounce. The kettlebells taught me to really be aware of what my feet were doing when they were on the mat or they were on the plaza. And it definitely expedited that part of training, learning to walk like a tomb guard. So I remember seeing the next TDY class came in and they jumped right into that. I think it's because he saw how much it helped me. And he was I think he was a TDY instructor for the next class. And I remember he had them all in there during the duty day, out of the public eye. So that is definitely still alive and well.
Nice. Did you have mirrors down in the catacombs when you were there?
We did not. No there.
I want to say thank you for taking the time today to answer a question that is floating around the interweb and to dispel a rumor about we don't dress in front of a full-length mirror. We dress where we need to in the quarters, and then we go and we practice in front of a mirror. We get bloused in front of a mirror, but we don't dress in front of them except for that one Sentinel, which will remain unnamed. What the importance of learning the sequence, especially when it comes to the 21 count, and why it's important that 21 is a number that tomb guards take dear to their heart. So thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for taking the time today to answer those questions and those myths.